Chapter 1. You're not losing women because you're a bad guy. You're losing them because you're safe. And safe doesn't create tension. Safe doesn't create curiosity. Safe doesn't create urgency. It creates comfort. And comfort without respect turns you into background noise. You don't want to hear that, but if you've ever watched a woman slowly fade while you were doing everything right, then you already know there's truth in it. You think being nice automatically equals value. You think patience equals maturity. You think always being available equals loyalty. But if you're honest with yourself, how often has that energy made her lean in? Not appreciate you. Lean in. There's a difference. Appreciation feels polite. Leaning in feels magnetic. And most nice guys are getting politeness instead of magnetism. Let's make this uncomfortable. When she tells you she just sees you as a friend, what she's really saying is that you've positioned yourself as non-threatening. Non-threatening feels easy. Easy feels replaceable. You didn't lose because you were cruel. You lost because you removed tension before it ever had a chance to grow. A major habit you need to stop immediately is over-accommodating her emotions at the expense of your own. Every time she's upset, you drop your priorities. Every time she's confused, you over-explain. Every time she pulls back slightly, you compensate by leaning forward harder. That compensation is the problem. You think you're stabilizing the connection. You're actually lowering your leverage. You've done it before. She takes longer to respond, and you start crafting perfect texts. She seems distant, and you try to have a mature conversation immediately. You don't give space. You don't observe. You rush to fix something that hasn't even broken yet. That urgency signals insecurity, even if your tone sounds calm. And insecurity kills attraction faster than silence ever could. Another habit is seeking subtle approval through kindness. You compliment her constantly. You validate her opinions automatically. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You make yourself emotionally accessible at all times. That constant availability feels generous to you, but to her, it feels predictable. And predictability without depth becomes boring. You might be thinking this sounds like playing games. It's not. It's about balance. When you give full emotional access without requiring investment, you collapse the dynamic. Attraction needs space to breathe. If you're always leaning forward, there's no room for her to step toward you. Let's talk about boundaries. Nice guys hate conflict, so they avoid drawing lines. They tolerate small disrespect because they don't want to seem controlling. They laugh off jokes that sting because they don't want to look sensitive. They let her cancel plans repeatedly because they want to be understanding. That pattern doesn't make you mature. It makes you optional. Optional men don't get prioritized. They get scheduled around. And if you've ever felt like you're the one adjusting constantly while she moves freely, that's not coincidence. That's positioning. You positioned yourself as flexible. Flexibility without firmness becomes invisibility. Another thing you need to stop is oversharing your feelings too early. Vulnerability is powerful when earned. Dumping emotional depth within the first few weeks feels intense but unstable. When you tell her exactly how much you like her before she's had to invest, you remove mystery. Mystery creates curiosity. Curiosity fuels attraction. Certainty too early suffocates it. You've probably had moments where you confessed strong feelings, and instead of deepening the bond, something shifted. She became slightly distant, slightly slower, slightly cooler. That wasn't cruelty. That was imbalance. You revealed your entire emotional position before she had to work for it. And once she knew she had you, the chase ended. Here's something else that's going to sting. Being agreeable in everything doesn't make you easy to love. It makes you easy to ignore. If she says she likes something, you automatically like it too. If she expresses an opinion, you soften yours to avoid friction. If she tests your stance lightly, you retreat. That retreat tells her your convictions are flexible. Flexible convictions don't command respect. You don't have to argue constantly. You don't have to be combative, but you do need to stand somewhere. Women are attracted to men who have internal gravity. Gravity doesn't move easily. If your opinions shift to maintain comfort, your gravity disappears. And let's address the biggest habit of all. Trying to earn love through performance. You believe if you just do enough, give enough, prove enough, she'll see your value. But value that has to be proven constantly feels negotiable. Real value is assumed through presence, through calmness, through quiet confidence, not through over-effort. I wanted you to think about your last relationship or situation. Were you constantly trying to show her you were different from other guys? Did you emphasize how loyal you were, how respectful, how mature? If so, you were selling, and selling signals need. Neediness lowers status automatically. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming grounded. There's a difference. Grounded men don't rush to fix every tension. They observe first. They let her meet them halfway. They don't over-explain. They don't overextend. They don't panic when energy shifts. If you're feeling defensive right now, good. That means something hit. Don't scroll away from it. Sit with it. Drop a comment if you've ever realized you were overgiving and under-requiring. Awareness is uncomfortable, but it's the only way you stop repeating patterns. You don't need to stop being kind. You need to stop being convenient. Kindness with boundaries commands respect. Convenience invites complacency. And complacency is the silent killer of attraction. You're not a bad guy. You're just too easy to access. And until you change that, you'll keep wondering why you're appreciated, but not desired. That shift starts with recognizing the habits that make you safe instead of magnetic. Chapter 2. You think the problem is that women don't appreciate good men. That's the story you tell yourself because it feels clean. It protects your ego. It lets you believe the issue is external. But if you're honest, the issue isn't that you're good. It's that you're predictable. And predictable without pressure doesn't inspire effort. It inspires comfort. Let's talk about overinvestment. You match her energy plus extra. She gives you a little attention, and you double it. She texts once, and you send paragraphs. She shows slight interest, and you start planning long-term ideas in your head. You don't even realize you're doing it. You think you're being enthusiastic. What you're actually doing is collapsing the tension before it has time to build. Attraction needs a small gap, not games. A gap between how much you feel and how much you reveal. Nice guys reveal everything immediately because they think transparency equals trust. But trust is built over time. If you reveal full emotional commitment too early, she doesn't feel chosen, she feels secured. And secured too early lowers urgency. You've probably experienced this pattern. Things start strong. She's excited. You're excited. But you escalate emotionally faster. You start checking in constantly. You prioritize her schedule. You drop your own plans. You subtly reorganize your life around her. And within weeks, her energy cools. You blame timing. You blame her past. You blame modern dating. But the pattern keeps repeating because the behavior stays the same. Another habit you need to cut immediately is seeking validation through consistency. You believe if you're always there, always dependable, always responsive, she'll feel safe and fall deeper. But safety without challenge doesn't create attraction, it creates friendship. If you become the emotional support system without being the emotional tension, you slide into familiarity fast. Familiarity isn't bad in long-term relationships, it's deadly in early dynamics. When she knows you'll always answer immediately, always forgive quickly, always adjust, there's no friction. No friction means no polarity. And without polarity, attraction plateaus. There's something else happening that you probably haven't considered. When you constantly prioritize her emotions over your own direction, you train her to expect it. That expectation becomes baseline. And once it becomes baseline, anything less feels like withdrawal. You accidentally create a dynamic where your full effort is normal and her minimal effort feels generous. That imbalance is self-created. Let's address conflict avoidance. Nice guys avoid saying things that might disrupt harmony. You don't tell her when something bothers you because you don't want to be that guy. You don't call out small inconsistencies because you don't want to seem insecure. But every time you swallow something, it compounds internally. And internally suppressed frustration leaks out eventually in passive ways. A woman doesn't respect a man who avoids confrontation to maintain comfort. She might appreciate it short term. But long term, she senses the lack of backbone. Backbone isn't aggression, it's conviction. If you never disagree firmly, she never feels your edge, and edge is part of attraction. Another habit that needs to die is over-explaining your boundaries. When you finally decide to set one, you cushion it with apologies. You say, "I don't want to sound insecure," but you soften it, you justify it, you make it negotiable. The moment you make a boundary negotiable, it's no longer a boundary, it's a suggestion. You don't need to be harsh, you need to be direct. Directness signals certainty. Certainty creates structure. Structure makes you feel solid, and solid men are easier to respect than flexible ones. There's also the issue of over-pursuit. Nice guys chase clarity constantly. If she seems slightly distant, you initiate a conversation immediately. If her tone shifts, you analyze it. If she cancels plans, you ask if everything is okay. You're trying to stabilize the connection in real time, but constant stabilization makes you look anxious, not secure. Sometimes the strongest move is observation. Let her energy shift without scrambling to fix it. Let her initiate occasionally. Let her wonder what you're thinking. When you rush to define every fluctuation, you remove emotional space. And emotional space is where curiosity forms. I want you to be honest about something. Have you ever felt like you were trying to prove you weren't like other guys? Maybe you emphasized how loyal you are, how emotionally available, how different you are from the players. That positioning automatically places you in comparison mode, and comparison mode lowers status. High-value men don't compare themselves. They simply exist in their lane. You might think dialing back effort feels manipulative. It's not about dialing back kindness. It's about matching energy instead of exceeding it constantly. If she invests lightly and you invest heavily, you create imbalance. If she invests moderately and you match it, balance forms. Balance keeps tension alive. Here's something else to consider. When you constantly initiate everything, you remove her opportunity to pursue. Pursuit doesn't always look like chasing. It looks like effort. It looks like her planning sometimes, her reaching out first, her adjusting her schedule. If you always lead every move, she never gets to demonstrate investment. And without demonstrated investment, attachment stays shallow. Think back to a time when you pulled back slightly. Not to punish, just to refocus. Did her energy change? Did she initiate more? Did she check in? Those reactions aren't games. They're indicators. Indicators that attraction responds to balance, not overextension. If you're recognizing yourself in this, don't shut down. That recognition is powerful. Drop a comment if you've ever realized you were overperforming for someone who wasn't matching you. Not to vent, to own it. Ownership is the beginning of correction. Being kind isn't the issue. Being conditional about your kindness is. When kindness becomes a currency you use to buy affection, it loses value. When kindness flows from a man who has standards and direction, it becomes attractive. The difference is intention and positioning. You don't need to become cold or detached. You need to become calibrated. Calibration means your effort reflects her effort. Your availability reflects your priorities. Your emotional depth unfolds gradually, not immediately. That shift alone changes how women perceive you. Right now, you're not losing because you're too good. You're losing because you're too accessible without requirement. And until you fix that, you'll keep being appreciated, but not pursued. Chapter 3. There's a moment most nice guys don't notice until it's too late. It's when she stops testing you and starts tolerating you. Testing at least means curiosity. It means she's gauging your strength. Tolerating means she already knows where you stand. And when she knows you won't push back, won't challenge, won't hold a line, the dynamic settles into something flat, comfortable, safe, replaceable. You probably think being easygoing makes you attractive. You tell yourself you're laid back, drama-free, chill, but sometimes chill is just code for unassertive. If she can decide everything, lead every interaction, choose every plan, and you follow along quietly, you've positioned yourself as adaptable instead of directional. Direction creates attraction. Adaptability without direction creates convenience. One habit that needs to end immediately is default agreement. You agree with her opinions automatically. You adjust your preferences to match hers. If she says she doesn't like something you enjoy, you soften your stance, not because you changed your mind, because you don't want friction. But friction, when healthy, creates polarity. Without polarity, everything becomes neutral. And neutral is where attraction dies slowly. You don't have to argue for the sake of ego, but you do have to stand somewhere. If you love a certain type of music, say it confidently. If you prefer a certain restaurant, state it. If you disagree with her perspective, articulate it calmly. You'd be surprised how much respect grows when you don't collapse your position to maintain harmony. Another thing you need to stop doing is apologizing for normal male energy. You apologize for wanting clarity. You apologize for having boundaries. You apologize for taking time to yourself. That constant pre-apology weakens your frame. You're signaling that your needs are negotiable before they're even challenged. You've probably said things like, "I don't want to sound crazy, but," or "I know this might be stupid, but." Those phrases shrink you before the conversation even begins. You're lowering your own standing in advance. And once you consistently lower yourself, she adjusts her perception downward too. Let's talk about emotional intensity. Nice guys tend to overshare because they believe transparency builds trust instantly. You tell her about your childhood wounds early, your insecurities, your deepest fears. You think vulnerability equals connection. Vulnerability does build connection, but timing matters. If you reveal depth before stability is established, it can feel heavy instead of intimate. Connection grows when emotional layers unfold gradually. If everything is exposed in the first few weeks, there's nowhere for tension to build. Tension doesn't mean conflict. It means curiosity. Curiosity about what you're thinking, about how you feel, about what you're building. When you reveal all layers too quickly, mystery evaporates. There's also the habit of over-prioritizing her schedule. If she's free, you're free. If she wants to hang out, you drop your plans. If she cancels, you reschedule instantly. That availability feels generous to you. To her, it can feel like you have nothing else going on. And whether she admits it or not, men with direction are more attractive than men who orbit around her time. You need your own structure, your own priorities, your own rhythm, not to prove a point, but because it stabilizes you. When your life is full outside of her, your presence feels chosen, not desperate. There's a big difference between, "I can see you anytime," and "I'll see you when it aligns with my schedule." One feels hungry, the other feels grounded. Here's something you might not want to admit. Sometimes you're nice because you're afraid of rejection. You believe if you're perfect enough, polite enough, attentive enough, she won't leave. That belief drives over effort. But attraction isn't secured by perfection. It's secured by confidence. Confidence includes the willingness to lose someone who doesn't align. Think about how you act when you're slightly afraid of losing her. Your tone softens, your standards loosen, your boundaries blur. You become more accommodating than you naturally are. That shift doesn't go unnoticed. She senses the fear, and fear shifts the dynamic immediately. There's a single story that captures this clearly. A guy I knew was dating someone who he felt was slightly out of his league. He overcompensated from the beginning, paid for everything, adjusted his schedule constantly, avoided disagreements completely. He believed his consistency would secure her affection. At first, she appreciated it. Over time, she became distant, less responsive, more critical. When he finally confronted her, she said she felt like she was dating someone who didn't challenge her. What she meant was he never stood in his own energy. He positioned himself beneath her, and eventually she treated him that way. He wasn't a bad guy. He just removed tension before attraction could root deeply. That story matters because it shows you the cost of overaccommodation. You think you're building safety. You're building imbalance. And imbalance never sustains desire. If you're starting to see how these habits connect, sit with that realization instead of brushing it off. Drop a comment if you've ever overextended to keep someone, not to shame yourself, to recognize the pattern. Patterns only repeat when they stay unconscious. You don't need to become colder. You need to become firmer. Firm in your schedule, firm in your opinions, firm in your boundaries, firm in your pacing. That firmness creates structure. Structure creates respect. Respect supports attraction. Being the good guy isn't the problem. Being the guy who abandons himself to be liked is. And once you stop abandoning yourself, you'll notice something shift. Women won't just appreciate you, they'll respond differently. Because you'll finally be operating from position instead of pursuit. Chapter 4. You keep thinking that if you just stay consistent long enough, she'll finally see your value. That if you just prove you're stable, prove you're loyal, prove you're different, something will click. But attraction isn't unlocked by endurance. It's activated by tension, and tension doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being anchored. There's a habit that looks harmless, but slowly destroys your position. You react immediately to everything she does. She posts something slightly suggestive, and you adjust your tone. She seems distant, and you adjust your availability. She compliments another man casually, and you adjust your energy. You are constantly calibrating yourself around her fluctuations. That makes you reactive. Reactive men don't lead. They follow emotional cues. The moment she realizes your mood shifts with hers, she understands she controls the emotional climate. That realization doesn't always make her cruel, but it removes uncertainty. And uncertainty is part of attraction. If she knows she can tilt your energy with small behavior changes, you've surrendered subtle power. Another nice guy habit you need to stop is over-validating her insecurities. You think constant reassurance makes you supportive. It can, temporarily. But if she says she's insecure about something and your immediate response is to flood her with praise every time, you train her to rely on external validation from you instead of stabilizing internally. That dependency feels intense at first. It rarely feels sexy long-term. Support her, absolutely, but don't become the emotional crutch that props up her self-worth entirely. When you constantly reassure without space, you reinforce fragility. And fragility inside a relationship creates imbalance. You also need to stop trying to be universally understood. Not every emotion you have needs to be unpacked instantly. Not every disagreement needs resolution within the hour. Nice guys rush to close tension because tension feels uncomfortable. But unresolved tension in controlled doses builds intrigue. When you let small misunderstandings breathe instead of dissecting them immediately, you create space for perspective to settle naturally. Let's talk about humor. Do you let her tease you without boundaries because you want to appear easygoing? Do you absorb jokes that subtly undermine you? There's a difference between playful banter and quiet disrespect. If she crosses that line and you laugh it off every time, she registers that as permission. Permission compounds. And once compounded, it becomes expectation. Here's something subtle but important. Stop narrating your intentions constantly. You don't need to explain why you're busy. You don't need to justify why you didn't respond immediately. You don't need to defend why you chose your priorities. The more you narrate, the more you seek approval. The less you narrate, the more you embody certainty. You probably think explaining makes you transparent. Sometimes it does. But excessive explanation signals insecurity. Secure men don't overclarify routine decisions. They move. And if someone questions, they respond calmly. They don't preemptively defend. There's also the habit of pedestalizing. You subtly place her above you in the dynamic. You treat her attention as scarce while treating your own as abundant for her. That imbalance shifts how she perceives you. Attraction requires perceived equality or slight polarity. When you elevate her too high, you lower yourself automatically. Pedestalizing shows up in small ways, overpraising her looks constantly, downplaying your own accomplishments, acting overly grateful for baseline behavior. You think you're showing appreciation. You're actually signaling hierarchy. And hierarchy in the wrong direction kills desire quietly. You need to recognize that women don't fall for men who are constantly trying to earn their spot. They fall for men who assume their spot calmly. That assumption doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from self-trust. Self-trust means you don't scramble when energy shifts. You don't overcorrect when tension rises. You don't abandon your priorities for temporary comfort. Ask yourself something direct. When she pulls back slightly, do you hold your pace or increase effort? That single reaction tells you whether you're grounded or anxious. Anxious effort repels. Grounded steadiness attracts. If this is hitting deeper than you expected, good. That discomfort is growth. Write down one habit you know you've been repeating, not to shame yourself, to interrupt it. You can't shift behavior you refuse to acknowledge. Another thing that needs to stop immediately is chasing clarity through interrogation. If you feel her energy dip, you don't need to conduct an emotional investigation. You need to observe and match pace. If she slows down, you slow down. If she invests, you invest. Matching energy keeps balance intact. Overinvesting creates imbalance. You don't need to manufacture distance. You need to stop erasing it when it appears naturally. Sometimes space isn't a threat. It's an opportunity for her to feel the absence of your presence. If you fill every gap instantly, she never feels that absence. And absence, when your presence has weight, deepens appreciation. There's a difference between kindness and submission. Kindness is strength with empathy. Submission is fear disguised as harmony. If you're afraid to disrupt the dynamic because you might lose her, you've already placed her above your standard. And once that hierarchy locks in, attraction declines slowly. You're not trying to dominate. You're trying to balance. Balance means your energy doesn't fluctuate wildly based on hers. Balance means you maintain direction even when she's uncertain. Balance means you don't chase reassurance through performance. Nice guy habits feel noble because they're rooted in good intention, but good intention without self-respect creates weak positioning. And weak positioning leads to frustration. Not because women are unfair, because dynamics are predictable. You don't need to become harsh. You need to become steady. Steady in your schedule, steady in your responses, steady in your standards, steady in your silence when silence is appropriate. When you shift from performing kindness to embodying confidence, something changes. Women don't just appreciate you, they respond differently. Because now you're not trying to be chosen, you're choosing to. And that mutual positioning is where attraction stabilizes instead of fading. Chapter 5. At some point, you have to admit something to yourself that stings a little. You weren't losing because you were kind. You were losing because you were trying to secure love instead of embodying value. There's a difference. Securing feels anxious. Embodying feels calm. And women respond to calm certainty in a way they never respond to over-effort. The final habit you need to stop immediately is tying your worth to her response. If she replies fast, you feel up. If she delays, you feel unsettled. If she compliments you, you feel strong. If she criticizes you, you spiral. That emotional dependency makes you unstable. And instability, even when hidden behind polite words, bleeds into your tone and posture. When you detach your self-worth from her behavior, everything changes. You stop reacting instantly. You stop scrambling for reassurance. You stop adjusting your personality to maintain connection. You become the same man regardless of her fluctuations. That consistency is magnetic, not because it's dramatic, because it's rare. There's something powerful about a man who doesn't overcorrect. She pulls back slightly and he doesn't panic. She tests lightly and he doesn't flinch. She compliments him and he receives it without swelling. She criticizes him and he evaluates calmly instead of collapsing. That steadiness creates emotional safety and tension at the same time. It signals depth. You need to understand something clearly. Women don't lose attraction to nice men. They lose attraction to men who abandon themselves in the name of being liked. Abandonment of self is visible. It shows up in over-agreement, in over-texting, in over-explaining, in over-prioritizing. It shows up in the subtle shrinking of your voice. Think about how you act when you feel fully confident in your life, when you're focused on your mission, when your schedule is full, when your body feels strong, when your finances are aligned. You don't obsess over response times then. You don't overthink minor shifts. You don't beg for reassurance. You move. That version of you is attractive because he isn't performing. He's progressing. Now, compare that to the version of you when you start centering her approval. Your workouts slip. Your projects pause. Your conversations revolve around her mood. You check your phone constantly. You analyze texts. That shift is noticeable. You feel it internally. She feels it externally. And that's when the dynamic begins tilting away from you. If you want to stop being the safe option, you need to reclaim internal direction. Direction means you have somewhere to go regardless of who walks beside you. It means your life doesn't collapse if she exits. It means you choose from position, not from fear. Here's a hard truth. Some women were never meant to be convinced. If you have to sell yourself constantly, she's not aligned. High alignment feels smooth. It doesn't require excessive proof. It doesn't demand constant reassurance. It grows organically when both sides invest. If you're the only one trying to generate momentum, that's not attraction. That's pursuit imbalance. You might be afraid that changing these habits will make you colder. It won't. It will make you clearer. Clear men are easier to respect. Clear men are easier to follow. Clear men don't negotiate their identity to avoid temporary discomfort. I want you to think about one thing right now. If you stopped over-texting, over-explaining, over-agreeing, and over-prioritizing her, what would change? Would she invest more? Would she test more? Would she lean in? Or would she fade? Whatever the answer is, it reveals alignment, and alignment matters more than effort. You don't need to ghost people. You don't need to become distant intentionally. You need to operate at a pace that matches her investment. You need to speak with conviction. You need to keep your schedule intact. You need to stop apologizing for normal standards. These aren't games. They're recalibrations. If this has hit you in a way that feels slightly uncomfortable but accurate, take that seriously. That discomfort is the gap between who you've been operating as and who you need to become. Drop a comment with one habit you're committing to stop. Not for validation, for accountability. Awareness without action keeps you stuck. Being a good man is valuable. Being a grounded man is powerful. The difference is grounding doesn't seek approval. It doesn't overextend. It doesn't chase clarity at every fluctuation. It holds position calmly. And when you hold position, women either align or exit. Both outcomes are wins. You don't need to be less kind. You need to be less convenient. You don't need to be less caring. You need to be more centered. When kindness flows from strength instead of fear, it becomes attractive instead of safe. If you've been appreciated but not desired, understood but not pursued, stable but not exciting, the issue isn't that you're too nice. It's that you've been operating without tension. And tension comes from conviction. Conviction in your time, conviction in your boundaries, conviction in your direction. Hit the like button if this shifted something for you. Share it with the friend who keeps wondering why he's always the good guy who never gets chosen. And subscribe if you're serious about evolving beyond habits that feel noble but cost you leverage. You don't have to transform overnight. You just have to stop shrinking. The moment you stop shrinking, the dynamic changes. Not because you became someone else, because you finally stayed yourself.